So today I want to talk about how Alabama ain't really played nobody, and there's a soft spot in the defense that not a lot of folks are able to take apart, and not a lot of folks I think have noticed, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. So it's OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today we're going to talk about Alabama and how they ain't really played nobody, Paul, when we're talking about the offenses that they have faced. And yes, the defense is good. And yes, the defense is stout. But there is a bit of an opening if you have the tools to exploit it on the Alabama defense. So first, I want to talk about Alabama and their schedule. Now, we talk a lot about the SEC. We talk a lot about how great the SEC is defensively and how we give them a lot of points for beating up on each other in the same conference and saying somehow that makes them better football teams than the rest of college football. Well, first of all, let's talk about the non-Power 5 conference teams on Alabama's schedule, like Arkansas State, like Louisiana, like Citadel. I still don't understand how Alabama can excuse Citadel being on the schedule in November, and also how Alabama fans can continue to hold up Citadel as a good win. I care little about how much you beat Citadel by. I care that you went in tied 10-10 to Citadel. I don't get why you were holding that up as anything other than what it is, which is an FCS opponent that's really not that good. They're 5-6. And Louisiana, they made a bowl game. Also got beat down by Tulane. And who is Tulane to any of us? What I'm saying is, none of this is worth talking about. And yet, here we are talking about it. So let's talk about what Alabama has done against these teams defensively, and what really have they actually faced when we're talking about name brand offenses. Well, let's go down the list here. I looked at the scoring for each of the teams on Oklahoma and Alabama's schedule, and let's go through and see what we see. So the first team on Alabama's schedule was Louisville, and Louisville averaged 18.7 points per game. Perspective, Georgia holds teams to fewer points per game than that. And also Louisville was historically bad and got their head coach fired for being so historically bad because they ranked number 122 in college football in scoring points per game. The next team on the schedule, Arkansas State, which ranks number 43 when we're talking about points per game at 30.3 a game. The next team on the schedule, finally we get in the SEC, finally we get in the conference play, and we see a team that barely ranks in the top 50 in Ole Miss. Ole Miss ranks 45 with 30.1 points per game. And then the next team, Texas A&M, ranks inside the top 30 by being number 30, averaging 32.5 points per game. But remember, that's with 74 points on the schedule against LSU. So even with the 74-point game on the schedule, they still only average 32.5 points per game. So ampersand U, maybe not the best offensive team in college football. We know this. Now, Louisiana also averages 32.5 points per game, but Louisiana doesn't even rate for the top 130 FBS teams because nobody really considers them that good. Like, you go down the rankings and you have a hard time finding Louisiana because they're not even listed. That's how much people really care about Louisiana. The next team on the schedule, Missouri, actually pretty good. Comparable to Big 12 teams. Number 19 in scoring points per game with 35.6 points per game. Also had an NFL caliber quarterback in Drew Lock quarterbacking the team. The next team on the schedule hardly could have been called good, and that was Tennessee, ranked 120th in points per game at 19.5 points per game, which is just dismal. Jeremy Pruitt has some things to figure out, particularly who the offensive coordinator is going to be for his Tennessee team going forward. And I just don't know who that is going to be or what that's going to look like for them. Next team on the schedule is LSU, which actually, again, ranks pretty good at number 33, averaging 31.8 points per game. And no matter what you say about them, they also got blown out by Georgia. Next team on the schedule is Mississippi State, ranks number 78 in scoring points per game. Nick Fitzgerald and the gang were only good for 26 points per game. That's what I'm trying to tell folks, is that this schedule ain't really tested Alabama defensively. Now, after Mississippi State is Citadel. And Citadel, again, like Louisiana, doesn't rate because it's FCS and they averaged 29 points per game, scored 10 on Alabama in the first half. And then we move on to Auburn, which ranks number 85 at 25.1 points per game in a year where Gus Malzahn needed to take back the play calling duties because they so badly are garbage on that side of the ball. To say nothing of losing Jarrett Stidham to the NFL draft this year. And then finally, you get to another good offensive team in Georgia, number 13 overall, 38.7 points per game. And that's a team that should have beat Alabama and had them dead to rights. Which is kind of getting me back to this point. When you get to see offenses that are pretty good, they stopped Missouri. They couldn't stop Georgia. How do we think they're going to stop Oklahoma? And then you talk about Oklahoma and having a historically bad defense when you're talking about the college football playoff. Well, first of all, small sample size, 5 years. But the sample size is also the sample size. I get it. The defense for Oklahoma is historically bad when we're talking about the top 4 teams in college football and playing in semifinals and playing for national championships, maybe. But also, when you take into account Oklahoma and what defensively it faced, the team that put up 704-yard total offense against them, West Virginia, ranked number 10 overall at scoring points per game, and the defense still scored 12 points in that game. As a matter of fact, Oklahoma faced 5 teams that ranked inside the top 50 in scoring points per game. In West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Texas, and Army. And that's excluding FAU, which ranks number 52. And when you're talking about average and the average ranking for the team that you face that scored points, you're talking about Alabama facing an average of about 66 in the rankings and Oklahoma facing an average of about 61. Now, nobody here is saying that Oklahoma's defense is on par with Alabama's defense. I'm also saying that no offense has really got it together to test Alabama except Georgia. And we saw what that looked like. It looked like them almost winning. And also, if you don't get an outstanding performance from this Alabama offense that everybody wants to tell me keeps operating like a Big 12 offense, they're really beatable. Remember, Tua Tagovailoa's QB rating in that SEC championship game was 15.1. He was bad. 10 of 25, 164 yards, 2 picks and a TD. You get that kind of performance against Oklahoma, Oklahoma's going to win because it's a much better offense than Georgia. Georgia ranked number 13. Oklahoma ranks number 1. I get that Alabama ranks number 2. But in the way that Ruffin McNeil has been calling the defense since he took over, he's been sending guys more often on blitzes and asking his kids on the back end, if you got a chance to jump a route, jump a route. But for the most part, they're trying to get sacks, they're trying to get tackles for loss, and they're trying to get turnovers that way. And then if you looked at the SEC championship like I did, you would see that Georgia knew exactly how to attack this Alabama defense, and that's in the middle of the field. Alabama's linebackers are good, but they are not great, particularly Dylan Moses. Dylan Moses was meat for Isaac Nada and whoever lined up in the slot and was running seam routes across the middle. With Oklahoma, with Lee Morris and Grant Calcaterra and your slot receivers, I expect those guys to eat all day because the way that Alabama wants to play defense is say, our cats are better than your cats. They're going to run some man, they're going to run some soft zone, and they're going to say to Dylan Moses, you can run with tight ends and wide receivers, and that ain't necessarily true, especially when I know that Isaac Nada is a good tight end, but Grant Calcaterra and Lee Morris can do all he can do and more. And because Lincoln Riley is calling the offense, you have better and more opportunities to dial up some really creative disguises to get those guys open across the middle and get matchups with these linebackers in the passing game. And if you get matchups against these linebackers in the passing game, you have an opportunity to open up toward the run. That's the one thing that Oklahoma is going to do that Georgia tried to do, which was establish the run early so you get those play action passes, you suck up the defense, you get man coverage, and let Lee Morris, Grant Calcaterra go to work while Marquise Hollywood Brown, CeeDee Lamb take the top off the defense. It's not insurmountable a task to beat this Alabama defense. It is about whether or not you can show up and make plays when it's time for you to show up and make plays. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.